To further describe the difference between the modern and the postmodern, we have to look at the framework of truth the modern has versus the framework of truth the postmodern has. Now, moderns don't like to admit to it, but moderns are really the product of relative truth, not absolute truth. And there are conservative moderns who make the argument that that they believe in absolute truth, and that the liberals believe in relative truth, and that is not true. Quite honestly, anyone who's a modern is a relativist. Quite honestly, because the concept of relativity is more of a scientific term that had implications for the entire culture, from the way, particularly for how we view things. When Einstein came on the scene in the early 1900s, with his relativity theory, you also had Picasso, who was painting from a relativity perspective. And essentially all relativity means is that two people in two differential time frames will view the same object from different perspectives, and it will not appear the same to them, so that if they came together to talk, they would not agree on the same thing. It's very interesting if you look at the study of colonialism. Colonialism had to die in the 1900s. It had to die in the 20th century because it did not support the concept of relativity. Because with relativity, there can be many people observing the same object but having different perspectives on it. However, those perspectives are still, insofar as they relate to the object, they're still within the realm of truth. So the postmodern, however, has seen how relativity quickly moved into relativism, because with the modern will bifurcate life. He will see spiritual things in one particular light, and he'll see physical things or matter in another light. And he treats both differently. In his spiritual frame of mind, by the way, which does not really have any bearing on the world, not as much bearing as the physical part of the world, according to the modern anyways. When he's in his spiritual frame of mind, the world, the rules that apply to the world and to himself and to his heart and to heaven and to hell and all those things, they take on a completely different view and a completely different theoretical type seriousness than the actual world, in which he's dealing with work and with children and with money. And so the postmodern looks back on it, and he sees that even though the modern tells his child there's only one way to live, that the modern himself is a relativist, because he looks at various different things from various different perspectives. Now, I would argue that relativity, that every modern is a relativist in the relativity sense. But relativism is something very, very different. Relativism is the idea that there can be varying levels or varying a value system that varies from one person to another person. And that's something completely different. So I'm not talking about relativism, I'm talking about the concept of relativity. The postmodern sees, like I said, this systematic dysfunction with his modern parent, and he says, you know what? Mechanics will not rule my life, and relativity will not rule my life. Because, my parent, or the modern, takes his relativism or his view of truth that he modifies for different things he values. He takes that very, very, very seriously. And if relativism, if this kind of truth is, if truth is really relative, then I'm going to play with logic. And that's one of the reasons why postmoderns will not be affirmative about certain things that they feel are left up to speculation. That's why postmoderns tend to be very kind of not blasé, but non-committal. And it's not because they're trying to be bad. That's just the baseline of the culture. They look at, they don't have absolute truth as their standard. They don't have it at all. They've got relativistic truth as their standard, and they reject this seriousness with which the modern approaches relativistic truth because it's relative. And so for a modern, he takes on more of a gaming type structure. He will pick and choose what he wants. We call it cafeteria style, and a lot of people criticize postmodern for doing that, but that's really what they're left with. At least they're not left with taking gaming seriously or taking relativism as seriously as the modern, because look where it got us.